guys, welcome back to my channel. This is the final wrap up of all of the books that I read this year. I read 80 books. I've got them stacked behind me. We're gonna try and get through all of these, basically just talking about what my thoughts were on them, my rating, and a quick summary of what the book is. Hopefully we can do this without it taking too long, so I'll probably be moving pretty quick throughout this video. I will try to be good about linking up at the top, whichever side that is, the videos where I talked more in depth. So most of these are included in some other video, either a monthly wrap up or a video specifically filmed for them. So if you watch up above in the corner, I will try to make sure that I've linked as many of those videos as possible in case you want a more in-depth review. But this is going to be the speed round overview of my thoughts on these books. I have the majority of them back here behind me, so I'll go through those. I'm also going to be keeping track of my Goodreads to make sure I talk about the audiobooks because I've got quite a few that were on audiobook this year. That being said, let's jump right into it. The first book that I finished this year was The Last Supper on the Moon. I actually read this mostly last year, but I did finish it right at the beginning of January this year. I gave this one 5 stars. This would fall into, I think, Christian nonfiction is what it'd be. It is by Levi Lusko. Basically, this book covers a lot of stories from his life, along with it is talking about the 7 statements from the cross, the 7 letters to the churches, and it's doing all of that from the perspective of space analogies. So it's a very unique, interesting book. If you are Christian, I think this is a really interesting new lens on some of the stuff that we already know about, and I would highly recommend it. Next, I read Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I think the plot was really interesting. There were some good plot twists. There's a bit of language in this one, so just be aware of that. It maybe isn't like, it's definitely more of an adult thriller. I wouldn't classify this as YA. And that's kind of the gist. It's hard to talk about thrillers without spoiling things. Next one is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This one is 1 star. I'm not even gonna get into it. This book just made me feel gross. I don't like it. Don't recommend. Then I read If We Were Villains. If you can't tell, I was reading some of the more popular books at the beginning of this year. This one is by M.L. Rio. I gave this one 3 stars. I think it's a very interesting plot and setup. Basically, you have this guy who's just getting out of jail, and the detective is pretty sure that he wasn't who did it. He thinks he was a fall guy, and so he takes the detective back to the college where the murder happened in order to explain the real story, but you don't know if he did it or not. And so you're getting basically that current timeline with him and the detective, and then you are getting the flashbacks to when these students were all in a theater school learning Shakespeare and somebody dies. So good, lots of language in this one too, so just be aware of that. Okay, then the next 4 I'll talk about kind of all together. I think I gave all of them, so the first 3 I gave 4 stars, the last one I gave 5 stars. This is one of the 39 Clues series. So if you don't know, there's like the main series within 39 Clues, and then there's a few that follow different plots. This one I believe is the 3rd one. It's called Unstoppable. That's like the overarching name of the series. And basically you're following the same characters from the original series, but they are now having to deal with, I believe, basically, without trying to do this without spoiling the plot of the first series, but they're basically dealing with the fallout of some of the stuff that happens in the first series. So these ones are good. They're quick, really fun reads. These are meant for like younger kids. They're middle grade, so if you want something super fast and easy, I really love 39 Clues. And then the next 3 that I read are The Lord of the Rings, and I have a whole video about this, so I'll be pretty quick on these ones. But the first one is The Fellowship of the Ring. I gave this one 3 stars. This one's a little bit slow. It's all world building. Like, you really don't get into the plot that much in this book. This is primarily just world building. And then you have The Two Towers. I gave this one 4 stars. I think the plot picks up a bit more in this one. This one's also a lot smaller, but you really start to see what the actual plot is in this book. About halfway through is where you really start to get action and it really picks up. And then you have The Return of the King, and this one is the 3rd and final one of the trilogy. This one is a lot more action. I gave this one 4 stars. I still think it's a little bit slow. These just aren't like the most thrilling books in the world. They are definitely more of a focus on the world building, but you've got to give them credit for how much work did go into the world building. So fun books. I definitely like The Hobbit better, but I'm glad I read that. Then the next one that I read was The Red House Mystery. I actually picked this up while we were in London earlier this year. It is by A.A. Milne, I think is how you say his name, which if that name sounds vaguely familiar to you, it is because that is the author of Winnie the Pooh. And so, kind of random, but this is his take on a mystery book. I would highly recommend reading the little prologue introduction thing where he actually goes through and talks about all of his strong opinions on how mystery books should be written, and then this is basically his response to that of writing a mystery book, how he wants it to be written. And then last one in that stack is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides? Something like that. This is a, I guess I'd say interconnected standalone with The Silent Patient, also by this author. It doesn't overlap a ton, but there's a tiny little bit where the characters cross over, which is fun. But basically this one is set in Oxford. There's murders of these girls, and you are following this therapist, like most characters that we're learning, when she goes to help her niece who is living at Oxford at the time. So this one is really good. I gave it 4 stars. I like The Silent Patient better, but I did think this one was fun. Next was I Hunt Killers. I gave this one 3 stars. This is basically about the son of a serial killer who then decides to start helping the cops try and solve murders. I thought it was okay. I wish it would have been done a little bit different. It was a great idea, not the best execution. He's still like a teenager in it, and I think it would have been more interesting if it was more of an adult character. Alright, then the next few books are, I went through and reread some of my favorite books from when I was a kid, so all of these are more like middle grade type books. But the first one is The Fairy Tale Detectives Sisters Grimm, book 1. Basically, it's about these 2 girls who are orphans. They go to live with their grandma, and she lives in a town where fairy tale creatures and characters are real. And so then they have to go and try and solve a mystery that's happening along with all of these fairy tale characters. I gave this one 4 stars. It was as good as I remembered it, I think. It's definitely written for kids, but it is really fun if you want basically just fairy tales, but take a twist on them that's a little more mystery-esque. These ones are fun. And then I read The Alchemist. This is book 1 in the The Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel series. Basically, you're following Nicholas Flamel, who is a famous alchemist, and he has figured out immortality, and then you follow these 2 teenager twins who meet him and get pulled into the world of magic. This one I gave 4 stars. I think it's good. It's a fun series. If you want something magical, they cover lots of different types of magic, so it's not just, and different types of gods, so you're not following just like one mythology group, and so that one is kind of interesting that you're getting to look at lots of different things. Then I read Theodosia and the Serpents of Chaos. This one is a series about a little girl who her parents are curators of an Egyptian museum, and she is into black magic, and so basically all of the items that get brought in that are cursed, she has to be the one to cast off those curses. And so you're following her as she unravels all these crazy secrets. I give this one a good 4 stars. It's fun. It is meant for kids, so it's not anything crazy plot-wise. I do think you get more into, if my memory serves correct, I do think you get more into a plot in the second and the books after that. So I think this one's more of just like a setting up the world, not so much on the plot. Then the next one that I read is, the name of this book is Secret by Pseudonymous Bosch. This one is a very funny, sarcastic, silly book, also meant for kids. But basically this magician goes missing, and these kids decide that they're going to try and figure out what happened to the magician and save him. And it kind of goes from there. There's lots of funny things. It's got a interesting narrator. I give this one 4.5 stars. I think these are just super fun, quick reads, and they do have a decent plot for being kids' books. Okay, then the next one that I read is Far World. This one is specifically Waterkeep. This is by J. Scott Savage. This is a series, it's a fantasy series. YA is probably where I'd classify it. It's a little older than the previous books I've been talking about, but basically you have these 2 kids, 2 teenagers. One of them is on Earth, and then one of them is in Far World, this magical world, and they end up getting connected, and they have to go on this quest to try and basically save their own lives because they have some people chasing them, and it kind of goes from there. I gave this one 4 stars. I think this one is a great beginning book. It sets things up. They're super magical but also have a really good plot. And then I did immediately go into the rest of the series. So the next one that is Landkeep, they basically follow all of the elements. And so there's lots of elemental magic. Each one focuses on a different element. This one is Landkeep. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I think you get a lot more of the plot going on. You start to see some interesting things going on. Then I read Airkeep, and this one I did give 5 stars. The plot has picked up a ton by now. You're getting all sorts of crazy things, lots of battles happening. It's super fun. This one does end on quite the cliffhanger. So I did go right into Firekeep, which is the final one. This one is wild. There are plot twists galore. I did give this one 5 stars. There are even plot twists in the epilogue. So I love this series. This is definitely in my top series, and I think the covers are all just so cool. But this is in one of my top fantasy series for the year. Okay, after that I took a little bit of a break from all of the magic fantasy things and I read The Westing Game. This one is just a tiny little mystery whodunit book where this one basically has the same setup as Knives Out, so if you want something similar, this could be an option. I did give it 3 stars. I felt like it didn't do anything super crazy and it took so long to get into the murder, and so I don't know, not my favorite, but if you really want something kind of with a similar setup, this could be an option. And then I read The Rent Collector by Cameron Wright. This is a story about a woman who lives basically in the dump in Cambodia and about her attempt to learn to read in order to better her family's life for the future. So this one's very inspiring, a bit emotional. It's not as much as you'd think it would be. I think this would be a great book for moms to read. I gave it 3 stars. I don't feel like I could connect tons with the character, but I think if you are a mom, this one might hit really hard for you. Next I read Dune Messiah. This is book 2 in the Dune series. I really liked the first book. Second one, I think there's a reason that most people only seem to read the first one. I gave this one 3 stars. It's a little boring, it's a little confusing, but it's interesting to see where the characters go. I still might continue this series just because I'm curious, but I think you could safely read Dune and just call it good there. Alright, then the next 4 I'll talk about together. This is the rest of the Secret series that started with the name of this book is Secret. Book 2 is If You're Reading This It's Too Late. Book 3 is This Book Is Not Good For You. Book 4 is This Isn't What It Looks Like. And book 5 is You Have to Stop This. Basically, you are following the same characters as they go through different things. You start to get a really running plot. You've got the same villains in kind of the whole series, and you're just following all of these different encounters with them until the last book where they finally wrap everything up. Book 2, I gave 4 stars, and then book 3, I gave 3.5. Book 4 I gave 4, and then book 5 I gave 4.5. So they are still kids. They do keep the same funny, just sarcastic, upbeat tone. So if you want something that's more on the lighthearted side, these are a good option. And then scoot over a little bit because we have reached my first audiobook. And this was The Word is Murder by Anthony Horowitz. This is book 1 in the Hawthorne and Horowitz series, which is basically a series about this detective comes to the author and asks him to write a book about him solving a murder. The twist, though, is that the author in the book is the author of the book, Anthony Horowitz. And so the author is actually a character in the books, which is really funny how it's done. I really like them. Book 1 I gave 4 stars. I think it is a great, funny concept. The characters are interesting. I will say one of the characters is super private, and so you don't get a lot of character development from that specific character in the first book of the detective, so just be aware of that. Then the next one is The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood. She's also the author of A Handmaid's Tale, which I have not read. I'm a little scared about the content in that one. I chose this one because I thought it would be a little safer on the content side of things, and I do think it was. It's definitely still more of an adult book, but it's not got anything too crazy bad in it. There's not a lot of language. It's set in like the 1940s, so there's not a ton of language. There's nothing too crazy, but I still would say it's probably more of an adult book. But basically you are following this one woman and her family. You've got the present time when she's an old lady and her family's kind of fallen from grace, and then you've got flashbacks to like newspaper articles of how that happened, and then you also have this book that her younger sister published, which was kind of considered this like scandalous book, and so you're getting chapters from that, and then it all does kind of come together at the end. The book, like the back of the book really describes this as if it was almost like a mystery book. Like, it sounds super suspenseful and there's a big twist at the end. I don't feel like it was that. I feel like it's much more literary fiction. I gave it 3.5 stars. I think her writing is really good, and if anybody has recommendations of other books by her that are a little safer on content wise, I would be interested in reading another book by her. I think her writing's good. I just think go into it thinking it's literary fiction, not the mystery that it kind of sells itself as. And then these were in the same videos, again I'll have that linked above, but the next one I read was Pedro Paramo by Juan Rulfo. This is a magical realism book that is so incredibly confusing, I don't even know if I can explain the plot for you. I gave this one 3 stars. I think if you like books that are just kind of... if you like books that are a little bit confusing, you're more just in it for the ride, and it's okay if you're confused, I think you can enjoy this book. If you really like to have a plot and know what's going on in your book, probably not the one for you. It's super short though, so if you want to give it a try, you could. It wasn't for me. I could see that there are some people that might like it. It's considered a classic in Mexico, but it wasn't the book for me. Then the next 2 books were audiobooks from when we were road tripping across the country. The first one is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This one is a sci-fi book. It's kind of a classic. I gave it 4 stars. Basically, it's one of your classic things are going down, the Earth's about to die, everybody's dead, going to die, so there's this last-ditch effort to send someone into space to do this science-y thing to try and save the world, essentially, and all of humanity. And so you're following that. I can't really say a ton more without spoiling things. It is pretty heavily science-y, so I will give you a heads up on that one, but I think it explains it good enough that you can still follow along, as long as you're okay not knowing every single detail of what's happening. I think the audiobook was really good, so if you're looking for a good audiobook, I really liked the narrator on this one. It was super interesting in audiobook form, so would recommend. I did like Project Hail Mary, 4 stars. Then the next one that we listened to is The Sentence is Death, which is number 2 in the Hawthorne and Horowitz series. I gave this one 3.5. This one is basically the same. It's a murder mystery. The author's writing about the detective. You're following the same 2 main characters, but they added a 3rd character in there that I really didn't like. She drove me crazy, and so lost major points for that. But she also had a lot of language. Like, I feel like the first book was not as bad. It's still a British detective story, so there's like some language, but the second one was way worse, so didn't love it as much. Alright, grabbing stuff books off of that sec. The next 3 books that I read was the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. This is my first Brandon Sanderson books that I've read. My husband loves Mistborn, so I finally read them. It starts with The Final Empire, which is, I gave 5 stars. I guess I'll just say now, I gave all of these 5 stars. I think they're super incredibly well written. It is a very creative world. The character development throughout the books is really awesome. So would highly recommend these books. Up there in favorite series from the year. I'm not going to try and explain what Mistborn is. If you want the full explanation, I think I did a decent job in my wrap-up, so that'll be linked. Then I picked up my first Agatha Christie for the year, which is crazy that it took me, this was like halfway through the year at this point. But I read The ABC Murders by Agatha Christie. This one's basically, there's a serial killer. This one is one of the Poirot books, so you've got your classic detective. He comes in. It's basically about a serial killer who's killing people with alphabetical names, so he has to solve it. It's your classic whodunit. I gave this one 5 stars. I think this one was one of the more creative ones I've seen from her in a while that I've read, so I did really enjoy it. It's a good one, up there in my favorites of the Poirot books. Then I read In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. I gave this one 3.5 stars. This one's your classic dark academia. Murder happened at college, they've all come back for a reunion, and now they're trying to work out who actually did it. I don't know how I feel about this one. The main character is so annoying. So that really puts a damper on things. You really don't care who did it because they're all just annoying. So it was alright. The twist was interesting. It's like your classic dark academia murder. There's nothing special about this one. Then I read The Family Romanov by Candace Fleming. This one is a nonfiction book telling the true story of what happened to the Romanovs. I think there's a lot of false stories about Anastasia out there, so this is the real one. It is written in basically novel form, using as many primary sources as she could to get quotes and stuff like that, so there's like dialogue and things. I think it's really interesting if you're wanting to know the real story. This one is a great read to get to know it. And I gave this one 4 stars. Then I read Juan de la Rosa. This is basically a fictional memoir about a soldier, or not a soldier, a kid during the Bolivian independence movement. I thought this one was really interesting. I gave it 4 stars. My one complaint about this one is you don't actually see him grow up. It's only like a snapshot of what happened. You don't get to the end of the war. You don't get to see like the end results of stuff. So I will say that was a little bit sad. I do think it's a really fun character voice, lots of cool descriptions. I just wish there was more of it. It was really my main complaint. So Juan de la Rosa, I really liked it. Then I read The Promise by Silvina Ocampo. The last one, the next couple that I'm talking about, were for reading South American authors. I didn't love this one. I gave it 2 stars. It's borderline a poetry book, and I just don't think it was meant for me personally. And that's all I'll say about that one. Then I read Chronicle of a Death Foretold by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This one is this one's sort of like a study on why people who knew a murder was going to happen didn't do anything about it. That's pretty much it. It's a pretty short story. It's not a murder mystery. You know exactly what happens the whole time. It's just a look at the people who were bystanders. And I gave this one 3.5 stars. It was okay. Then I went back to an Agatha Christie. I read The Murder on the Links. This one I gave 4.5 stars. It's not my favorite, but it's good. It's another one with Poirot. Somebody gets murdered on a golf course, essentially. I think it had a fun twist at the end. There's another character who, from my understanding, is in multiple of the books, and he was kind of fun. So it's just your classic whodunit. Then for the final one for that South American authors video, I read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but this one's your classic, like, quest story sort of a thing. You've got this boy who goes to follow his dreams, and then he learns all of these interesting things along the way. I gave this one 4 stars. I think it's good. I think you really would need to take the time to actually dive deep and think about it in order to get what I think you could out of this book. Then I read We Were Liars. This one's kind of was popular a long time ago, but I never read it. I gave it 4 stars. I think it was interesting. What I think a lot of people don't like about this book is the writing style. You are following someone who has had brain damage from an accident, and she's trying to figure out exactly what happened to her. And so it's written in a very disjointed, lots of weird breaks, some repetition types of things as if you were in her head, which I personally think was done really well. I think you do feel like you're in her head, but I know a lot of people don't like the writing style, so there's your heads up. Then another audiobook, I listened to book number 3 in Hawthorne and Horowitz. It's called The Line to Kill. I gave this one 3.5 stars. It was okay. Same concept as the other 2. I still think the first one was the best. Next one that I read was And Then You Die by Michael Dibdin. This is a basically police procedural in book form is how I would describe it. It's this detective who is in not witness protection, but he's in hiding in Italy because he's supposed to testify on this big case against the mafia, and so they're trying to keep him safe until he can testify. And then a dead body shows up on the beach where he is hanging out, and it kind of goes from there. I gave this book 3 stars. It was okay. I think it was supposed to be funny, but I just didn't connect with the humor. Then I read Speaker for the Dead. This is book number 2 in the Ender's Saga. I gave this book 4 stars. I actually think I like this one better than Ender's Game. You're basically picking up where that book left off. I can't say a ton more without spoiling book 1, but I do think this one's good. I would highly recommend continuing the series if you read Ender's Game and you liked it. Then I read Hamnet. I feel like this one got really big this year. This is basically the story of Shakespeare's wife and son, Hamnet, who inspired the play Hamlet. I think this is very speculative fiction. I don't know that we have a ton of actual information about these people. I gave this one 4 stars. I think it was really well written. It was a very interesting read. Just realized I don't think it's 100% real. So I think a lot of people are presenting this as almost nonfiction. I don't think it is, but I do think it was written really well. Then I went back to my ever trusty Agatha Christie and Poirot with the Mysterious Affair at Styles. This is, I believe, yeah, this is book number 1 technically. So this is your first introduction to Poirot. I think it's a really good look at kind of how the rest of the books are. I gave this one a 4.25. I started getting really specific with my Agatha Christie ratings just to try and differentiate which ones are my favorite, because they're all good, let's be honest. She is big for a reason, so to try and rank them, I've gotten really specific. I think this one is good, but I think it is a lot of like really developing the character of Poirot, so you're not quite as into it as you are in some of the later books. Then I read The Falcon Thief by Joshua Hammer. This is a true crime book about falcon smugglers, essentially. I didn't even really know this was a thing, but apparently rare bird smuggling is quite the industry, and this is about one of the biggest guys ever and the detective who caught him, essentially. It's very interesting if you want to learn about something that is just like a unique crime thing that not a lot of people talk about. This was well written. I think it was really interesting. Then I read my first Agatha Christie short story collection. This is Poirot Investigates. It is all Poirot stories, but they're like little short stories. I think this is good if you want to just like read a little bit here and there. I ended up honestly kind of reading it back to back. I didn't really take a lot of break in between the stories. They're fun. They're not as good as reading a full book of a mystery, but if you want just a little taste of Poirot before you commit to a whole book, these are interesting. Okay, then I listened to The Twist of a Knife, which is book 4 in the Hawthorne and Horowitz series. I gave this one 4 stars. I liked it a little bit better than the previous ones. I feel like you finally started to get some character information about Hawthorne the detective. I still think book 1's the best, so it was decent. I think there are more books coming out, but that's the last one that's out, to my knowledge, unless one's come out since the summer. Then I read the ever so popular Natural series, or first book of the series, by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is basically about these teens who get recruited by the FBI because of their specific skills. I thought it was good. I gave it 4 stars. I didn't like it as much as Inheritance Games, but I thought it was good. I haven't read the rest of the books yet, so maybe at some point this year I will. Then I picked up Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. This is book 1 in the Robert Langdon series. I love this series. I gave this book 4.5 stars. This is still, spoiler alert, my favorite one of the series. Basically, he is a symbologist professor and he gets brought in on this murder case about the Illuminati to try and bring his expertise to it and solve this murder, even though he's just like a professor. They're really fun. I loved this one. I thought it was super fast-paced. Again, this one's based all around the Illuminati, so that was really interesting. Then the next one that I read is Strange the Dreamer. This one is a fantasy book. It is so hard to explain. I'm not even going to try right now. It is by Laini Taylor. I gave it 4.5 stars. I think this book is really, really good. Her writing is super unique from other fantasy series that I've read. This starts out a little bit slow, but once you get into it, it gets really crazy. The ending of this book is painful. You will need the next book. Then I went back to the Robert Langdon series and I read The Da Vinci Code. This one's probably the most popular one, just of people knowing it because of the movies. This one I gave 4 stars. I thought it was good, but I definitely have seen the movie before I read this, so it spoiled a bit for me. Then I finally got my hands on The Muse of Nightmare. This is book 2 for Strange the Dreamer. It is a duology, so if you want something that's not fantasy but not a super long series, this is a good option. I gave this one 4 stars. I did like book 1 a little bit better. I feel like this one got a little heavier on the romance, but it was still really good. Her writing is still beautiful. Would recommend. Then I finished Children of Blood and Bone. This is book number 1 of the Children of Orisha series. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I think this series is so good. I listened to the first part of this on audiobook and then I finished the rest in a physical book. I think the audiobook is super helpful for pronunciations. There's a lot of hard names, so would recommend for that. This is basically about a fantasy version of Western Africa, and They used to have magic, but it got taken away, and now your main character has the opportunity to try and bring magic back. And so you're following her quest to do that. These books are so good. Love it. It tends to leave them off on quite the cliffhangers, so just be aware of that. Then, I was kind of doing every other thing. We're back to Robert Langdon series. This is The Lost Symbol. This one follows him in DC with the Masons. I gave this one 3.5. Not my favorite. I think there's been better mysteries, better plots, but it was still good. They're still quick, fun reads. Then I read Halloween Party by Agatha Christie. This is another Perrault book. It's probably my least favorite Agatha Christie I've ever read. I gave it 3 stars. This is supposedly the inspiration for A Haunting in Venice, the latest movie, but I don't think they actually have anything to do with each other. That's a scam. So, not my favorite. If you're gonna read Agatha Christie, don't start with this one. Then I read Babel. This one's another dark academia fantasy. It's so hard to explain. Just Google it. I gave this one 4 stars. It is a little bit slow. It is obviously a chunky, hefty book, but I thought what she did with it was super interesting. I wasn't a big fan of the ending. I kind of wish there was another book. I don't love open endings where you kind of get to decide where you think the characters ended up, and that's what this book is, so that's your heads up. It was good. I think it deserves the hype that it's gotten. Then I picked up a pretty much totally opposite tone of voice. This is The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England by Brandon Sanderson. This is a fantasy sci-fi book that is very humorous. It's super funny. I would highly recommend if you just want a nice lighthearted quick read. It is a standalone, unfortunately. I wish there were other books coming out with this world. I would totally read them, but this one is confirmed as a standalone, at least for right now. So if you want a Brandon Sanderson one, this one is not connected to the Cosmere, but if you wanted to get into his writing with a fun standalone that's just quick and easy, this would be a good option. Then I read The Haunted Mesa by Louis L'Amour. This is a Western mystery book. This was a reread for me. I will say I don't know that mysteries are really the best reread, so that kind of dampened my enjoyment of it. I did end up giving it 3.5 stars. That one's good. Definitely not a book I would highly recommend rereading, but reading it, I do. Then this book was one of my biggest surprises. Around Halloween, I just wanted a book that was like vampires, so I happened to find this one on a shelf. This is The Lights of Prague by Nicole Jarvis, and I loved this book. I originally gave it 4.5 stars. Honestly, it might be 5 stars. I have not stopped thinking about this book. I will say the internet says it's Fade to Black. I think it's got one scene that's a little bit more than that, but you can see it coming, you can kind of skip. So I really love this. It is set in old Prague in like 1800s. It's super vibey, perfect for Halloween. Great plot, interesting mystery. I love it. Highly recommend. And then I read book 2 of Children of Orisha. This is Children of Virtue and Vengeance. I gave this book 5 stars. It's just so good. It just continues from the other one. My one heads up that I will give you is this does end on a major cliffhanger, and the next book doesn't come out until June. So that is a book I will be majorly keeping my eyes out for. I will probably reread these right before that one comes out because I love them a lot. Then I read Xenocide by Orson Scott Card. This is book 3 in the Ender Saga. I gave this one 3.5 stars. This one's probably the most complicated one science-wise. I still do think it's really good. It's just not as good as the other two, but I would highly recommend it. I'm going to continue this series. Great books. I can't say more about that without spoiling the whole series. We are getting close to the end. I went back to Robert Langdon. This is Inferno. Basically same thing. This one follows a little bit of a different plot. He wakes up in Italy with no memory and people are trying to kill him. So super fun, same thing. They're just classic good mysteries when you need a quick book to read. And I gave Inferno 4.5 stars, so I did really like that one. It jumped back up for me. Then I read Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. This one is very popular, but also a lot of people I think skip this and just go straight to Six of Crows. I really like Shadow and Bone. I don't think you should skip it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I love the vibes of this. It's very like Eastern European fantasy. I thought it was great. I will be reading the rest of the series sometime this year, hopefully soon. I really like it, so I would say don't skip them. Then I read Renegades. This is another one that got so popular this year. This is by Marissa Myers. This is a superhero book. That's basically all you need to know. Is it's superheroes. I gave this one 3.75. I thought it was good. I think it's maybe a little overhyped. I'll probably read the rest of the series at some point. It's like still a fun superhero book, but maybe not as good as a lot of people are making it sound. Then its next four I'm gonna cruise through because I just uploaded like a week or so ago a video of my whole experience reading these, but this is The Hunger Games. I'll just cruise through. I gave book 1 3.5 stars, book 2 4 stars, book 3 4 stars, and then the prequel book I gave 4 stars as well. So I think these are really interesting. They need no introduction. If you want my full thoughts, I have like a 30-minute vlog of my whole experience reading these, so I'd go check that one out. Alright, then I read my last Hercule Poirot Agatha Christie book. This is Hercule Poirot's Christmas. It is just a classic whodunit. I don't need to say a ton more. I really liked this one. I gave it 4.5. Would highly recommend if you want a Christmas mystery. Then the next 3 books were all for a video that will be coming out soon, so more in-depth thoughts to come. But I read books by Southeast Asian authors, starting with First They Killed My Father. This one actually really surprised me and I gave it 5 stars. I think it's really well written. It covers a lot of heavy topics in a very consumable way. Would recommend. Then I read The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. Probably butchered that, but this one I feel like has gotten really popular. It's won lots of awards. I don't understand it. I gave this book 2.5 stars. It just wasn't the book for me. More thoughts to come in another video. And then this one I actually just finished last night. This is The High Auction. It is by Misbah. It's very short. This is episode 1 is what they call it, and I really think you need the rest of them. I gave this one 3 stars. This is definitely more of a ground building. I can't quite tell where the rest of the series is going from here, but I'm interested. I might read the rest of them at some point. We'll see. This just... You didn't really get into tons of what the plot was in this book, which is so short. It really is like I just read the first 150 pages of a book and then put it down. So I need to get the next books before I can actually really form an opinion on this one. And then the last one, this is the one that got me up to 80. This will seem super random, but this is the New Testament. This is just the scriptures that I was reading this year, read it cover to cover, so I figured I'd count it as a book because honestly, that took a lot to read that one. So obviously no ratings, it's scriptures. But that is all 80 books that I read this year. I hope you enjoyed hearing my reviews. Again, if you want more in-depth, I've got lots of videos on the majority of these books, so I will have them linked. I'm looking forward to this next year. I've got some reading goals put in place, some things that I'm planning on reading. I'm not going to go over them in this video because this video is way too long. I'll probably do a New Year's reset video and I'll talk about them then. But that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. You're a real one if you made it all the way through this video. And I will see you in the next one, which will probably be Southeast Asian authors. So, bye!